Welcome back to the Purple Political Breakdown. How's it going? How's your day been? We're back at it again. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back for another open panel episode. Now, this episode is very important. And if people are listening to the podcast, and just let everybody know that this is recorded, listen to the podcast, that these open panel conversations, I usually have people that I talk with that are good to come on and have great conversations. And I usually do the conversations in a platform called Head On. Great platform, highly recommend. Their link is in the description. With that said, today's conversation, today's dialogue that is going to be discussed is in regards to the Hamas, or better yet, Palestine-Israel ceasefire deal. And the big question that a lot of people are kind of mulling over is, does Donald Trump deserve credit? Now, this is a two-part conversation, of course, talking about the deal itself, what it encapsulates, but also talking about if this is lasting and current situations taking place may be indicating the future of this territory, this area, and what it would mean for both Israelis, Palestinians, and of course the United States of America. So we're going to talk about it in that lens, but we're also going to talk about Donald Trump, his participation, his deal, what it means for him to do this, what this does for his public image. Now, people who are listening to the podcast, you guys know that when it comes down to what I do on my platform, I am focusing on political solutions without political bias. I'm focusing on meaningful conversations, but there is no denying the fact that I do think Donald Trump is a very dangerous figure for the United States of America and the world, being the president of the United States. I think a lot of his ideas, and I do think the MAGA administration, can be dangerous. But one thing that I know it's very important when I'm especially trying to reach out and appeal to the masses, the average voters, and the more willing ears of the Republican side, not necessarily MAGA, is sometimes you got to be honest. I have no interest in lying. I have no interest in being deceptive. But the reality is that the fighting as of now, as of October 15th, 2025, has stopped or ceased. What will that mean for the future? We'll kind of discuss that. But as of right now, the fighting has ceased. And that's valuable. That's important because that means people are going to be able to get their aid. People are not dying, and the people's lives that are being affected are getting the, not necessarily justice, but getting what they deserve in terms of the help. So, Donald Trump, good on you. You finally did it a couple months in, and you at the very least helped orchestrate a ceasefire deal. Now, what does the ceasefire deal for the Donald Trump administration encapsulate? Well, apparently it's a 20-point plan that was signed by other Arab countries as well. And I'm going to speed run through it, but it's important to get all the details out of the way, especially because I plan to bring to the table the Biden deal as well under his administration. So, quick fire. Gaza will be a de-radicalized terror-free zone that does not pose a threat to its neighbors. Gaza will be redeveloped for the benefit of the people of Gaza, who have suffered more than enough. If both sides agree to this proposal, the war will immediately end. Israeli forces will withdraw to the agreed upon line to prepare for a hostage release. During this time, all military operations, including aerial and artillery bombardment, will be suspended, and battle lines will remain frozen until conditions are met for the complete stage withdrawal. Within 72 hours of Israel publicly accepting the agreement, all hostages, alive and deceased, will be returned. Once all hostages are released, Israel will release 250 life-sentence prisoners, plus 1,700 Gazans who were detained after October 7, 2023, including all women and children detained in that context. For every Israeli hostage who remains are released, Israel will release the remains of 15 deceased Gazans. Once all hostages are returned, Hamas members who commit to peaceful coexistence and to decommission their weapons will be given amnesty. Members of Hamas who wish to leave Gaza will be provided safe passage to receiving countries. We'll stop there. Hamas, as of right now, from our understanding, agree to the first part. So basically, before what I just read regarding Hamas, saying that they'll give away their weapons, everything in terms of the hostages be released, for the most part, all of that has been agreed upon. Now, we have not got a full declaration of Hamas agreeing on the entire deal, but there was an exchangement of hostages as of right now. All of the hostages held by Hamas have been released, and I think at least 2,000 hostages have been released from Israel. Now, with that said, there's already murmurs going on, and this kind of touches upon the more elaborate conversation on will this last, on Israel not being happy about, certain people not being returned. They're not, occupying the deal, and that they're threatening to only give partial aid because of it. And then there's other aspects with like Hamas allegedly assassinating Palestinian citizens. I'm not sure what that is about, but it's not smooth sailing as of right now. But at the very least, we could say that hostages have been released. Now, this is the rest of the stuff. In addition to Hamas saying, bye-bye, we'll just leave, this is the other part of this ceasefire deal. Upon acceptance of this agreement, full aid will be immediately sent into the Gaza Strip. At a minimum, aid quantities will be consistent with what was included in the January 19, 2025 agreement regarding humanitarian aid, including rehabilitation of infrastructure, water, electricity, sewage, rehabilitation of hospitals and bakeries, and entry of necessary equipment to remove rubble and open roads. And again, like I said, if anybody wants to come and join the conversation, let me know. This is recorded for my podcast. Continuing on, entry of distribution and aid in the Gaza Strip will proceed without interference from the two parties through the United Nations and its agencies and the Red Crescent, in addition to other international institutions not associated in any manner with either party. Opening the Rafah crossing in both directions will be subject to the same mechanism implemented under the January 19, 2025 agreement. That's the second time they amended the January 19th agreement. We will touch upon that in a second. Gaza will be governed under the temporary transitional governance of technocratic apolitical Palestinian committee responsible for delivering the day-to-day running of public services and municipalities for the people in Gaza. This committee will be made up of qualified Palestinians and international experts, with oversight and supervision by a new international transitional body, the Board of Peace, which will be headed and chaired by President Donald J. Trump. Let me bring you up, Amir. Invite to speak. You should be able to just come up now. With other members and heads of state to be announced, including former Prime Minister Tony Blair. This body will set the framework and handle the funding for the development of Gaza until such time as the Palestinian Authority has completed its reform program, as outlined in various proposals, including President Trump's peace plan in 2020 and the Saudi-French proposal, and can securely and effectively take back control of Gaza. This body will call on best international standards to create modern and efficient governance that serves the people of Gaza and is conducive to attracting investment. So we're about halfway into the deal. Before I continue, Amir, what's good? Did you have anything you wanted to say about everything that has been said so far?
No, just go on. It's good to see you,
Alright.
though. Go on.
Likewise. To continue on, a Trump economic development plan to rebuild and energize Gaza will be created by convening a panel of experts who have helped birth some of the thriving modern miracle cities in the Middle East. Many thoughtful investment proposals and exciting development ideas have been crafted by well-meaning international groups and will be considered to synthesize the security and governance framework to attract and facilitate these investments that will create jobs, opportunities, and hope for future Gaza. And the next thing is a special economic zone will be established with preferred tariff and access rates to be negotiated with participating countries. No one will be forced to leave Gaza, and those who wish to leave will be free to do so and free to return. We encourage people to stay and offer them the opportunity to build a better Gaza. Hamas and other factions agreed to not have any role in the governance of Gaza, directly, indirectly, or in any form. All military, terror, and offensive infrastructure, including tunnels and weapon production facilities, will be destroyed and not rebuilt. There will be a process of demilitarization of Gaza under the supervision of independent monitors, which will include placing weapons permanently beyond use through an agreed process of decommissioning and supported by an internationally funded buyback and reintegration program, all verified by the independent monitors. New Gaza will be fully committed to building a prosperous economy and to build coexistence with their neighbors. One big aspect when it comes down to this deal, and probably one of the biggest things when it comes to dealing with the conflict in the first place, is Hamas stepping down. That is the big crux. It's one, how is Hamas going to, or what will Hamas do? How will they step down? Will they step down? Will they leave? Will they forfeit power? That's a big one. Another big one is who will be running Gaza? Who will be in charge? Who will be the governing body? So we're kind of getting a layup, almost done, about like 4 or 5 more points before we're officially done with Donald Trump's deal. But some of the things that they're already saying immediately is that they're going to have a type of body. It's interesting that one of the people that will be leading it is Trump. I think he's not effective in that aspect. But they also said Tony Blair, which I would be more interested in looking up more things about Tony Blair. And the big one being the Palestinian Authority. And there's been issues with the Palestinian Authority, but at the very least, people can say that Israel and America definitely have a better relationship with the PA, even though that organization, that entity, had corruption issues in its history too. But with a collaborative effort, we would see how that kind of gets figured out. I am curious to see if more Arab countries, as I finish up the rest of it, how much of them will be involved, because they said qualified Palestinians. That's going to be a pick and choose method. Who will determine who is qualified? I mean, you would assume it's the head of the board being Trump, so that's interesting. International experts. Who are the international experts? I'm surprised that they don't outright say leaders of Qatar or leaders of Egypt, all of these other countries being a part of it as well. It seems like it's all going to be appointed by one man. So wait and see for that. And Hamas, whether or not they will put down their weapons, again, another big wait and see. To continue with the deals, a guarantee will be provided by regional partners to ensure that Hamas and the factions comply with their obligations and that New Gaza poses no threat to its neighbors or its people. The United States will work with Arab and international partners to develop a temporary international stabilization force, the ISF, to immediately deploy in Gaza. That's very interesting. So the U.S. Well, I don't think the U.S. will put their own military, but Arab and international partners, I'm very curious to see who will be a part of that. And I'll be curious if Israel will be part of that as well. The ISF will train and provide support to vetted Palestinian police forces in Gaza and will consult with Jordan and Egypt, who have extensive experience in this field. This force will be the long-term internal security solution. The ISF will work with Israel and Egypt to help secure border areas, along with newly trained Palestinian police forces. It is critical to prevent munitions from entering Gaza and to facilitate the rapid and secure flow of goods to rebuild and revitalize Gaza. A deconfliction mechanism will be agreed upon by the parties. Israel will not occupy or annex Gaza. As the ISF establishes control and stability, the Israel Defense Force will withdraw based on standards, milestones, and timeframes linked to demilitarization that will be agreed upon between the IDF, ISF, the guarantors, and the United States, with the objective of a secure Gaza that no longer poses a threat to Israel, Egypt, or its citizens. That's very interesting that in this situation, they just don't make it a clear-cut IDF leave. No, it has to be agreed upon against all the factors. Again, this is going to go over my overarching point when it comes to who this deal really favors. Practically, the IDF will progressively hand over the Gaza territory it occupies to the ISF, according to an agreement they'll make with the Transitional Authority, until they are withdrawn completely from Gaza, save for a security perimeter presence that will remain until Gaza is properly secure from any resurgent terror threat. Very vague. U.S. President Trump greets, I think that should be all of it. And then some other aspect. In the event Hamas delays or rejects this proposal, the above, including the scaled-up aid operation, will proceed in the terror-free areas handed over from IDF to the ISF. And those are kind of all the big points for the ceasefire deal led by Donald Trump and the other parties that were involved, including Israel. Mir, do you have any thoughts about this deal at all? Just curious.
Well, first of all, it's good to see that the fighting, at least for now, has ended. I hope the ceasefire continues in terms of just like the halting of the fighting. Um, I don't know if it will, to be honest, but at least for now, I'm hopeful. The second thing, which is to me the most positive part, because when I was hearing about this deal before it was done, like in the beginning, like a few months ago, when I was hearing about it, it did imply that Palestinians will have to leave. But when you read it now and earlier, when it was established, it said that they will not have to leave. No one will force them to leave. So that is another positive point. Um, as for the rest of it, I don't know how smoothly it will go because you said it's a 20-point plan. So both sides agreeing to 20 points is going to be difficult, especially when it comes to the on the ground, like person to person actions. Because whether it's on the Palestinian side or on the Israeli side, you have a lot of people that have conflating beliefs, and they all have power. They all have a say in what their supporters on the ground do. So some people in the Israeli government can, say, okay, we're going to leave, and then another would say no, like stay. Same thing about the Palestinians. Some members of Hamas could be like, okay, we're going to leave, and then others could be like, no, we're not going to. You don't really know what every person is going to do, so a lot could go wrong there. But like I said, I want to believe that it could be a start at least. So yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate that that their focus is at the end of the day the discontinue of the fighting, and we don't want the conflict to rise up again because a lot of innocent Palestinians are being affected in terms of the turmoil taking place between Israel and Hamas. One thing that is very clear to me when it comes to this deal is that I am it's pretty clear that the people who have leverage in the deal is Israel and is the United States of America. The deal is heavily skewed to them and what they got going on. And it really relies on Hamas's cooperation, and that's always up in the air. We just don't know how much they're willing to cooperate. Because the only thing we know for a fact is that they said they agreed to the first part. If Donald Trump and Israel decide that maybe Hamas finally figured out, hey, we're not going to win, so the fact that we get amnesty if we turn our weapons in, that's good enough, and we can just go to this other country. If that is enough, then congrats. We'll see how that kind of plays out. But if it's not, and they stay, one thing that was very interesting is that they said that, I mean, if they're still here, one, Israel is more than willing to start pulling back in terms of what the deal is proposing when it comes to the aid, building up the infrastructure again, helping out the Palestinians, and we'll kind of go into that. I'll kind of go into that a little bit more because that is kind of some things that they're already alluding to, literally 2 days after the ceasefire deal. But another aspect is how the vague terminology of the participation of the IDF in Israel when it comes down to it. They don't just say outright, oh, you just get out of here. No, they say, well, we'll agree upon something. And if there's still a terror threat that we both think that is still here, that is dangerous to Israel, then you can, at the very least, we'll do it a little bit slower. And you will, at the very least, have a legitimate place at the border between the two areas. So everything here is very Israel friendly, but again, the goal is helping the Palestinian people. So I am just curious to see how that plays out. I'm curious if Hamas will leave. I'm curious to see if Israel will stay akin to the agreed upon things that they said. I'm hopeful, or I hope that they don't go too far in terms of things that are happening in terms of the conflict where they see anything minuscule to enforce a certain type of retaliation, and that those are things to pay attention to. Were you about to say something?
Uh, yeah, there are 2 points to add here. So first, in terms of Hamas, the leader of Hamas, as far as I know, has said that they are stepping down. He said that yesterday, I think. So in that sense, yeah, like they have stated that. On the other hand, like you mentioned, Israel's involvement, I personally believe that they should not be involved because when you put Israel in a position where they are the judge and jury of their own actions, they can do anything and everything and get away with it. I mean, look at the West Bank. Let's be real. Israel should not be the authoritarian figure. There has to be a third party that does that, like that decides what's a threat and what isn't. Because Israel can consider a 9-year-old throwing a stone to be a reason to invade an entire town. They've done that before. Like I've seen that. So we cannot have Israel be the deciding authority on what's a threat. That's my opinion, at least.
I think that's fair. As of right now, there's also too much friction to kind of have that have this group or these people being the sole ones in charge. It seems very clear to me that the United States is going to be kind of the figurehead, but we at the same time, you never really know what's going to be going on, underneath the table, behind the details. So everything sounds good as of right now. And something that's very clear to me is when I compare this to the other deal that took place in January, that they referred to multiple times, it definitely seems like this deal was basically built off the foundation of Joe Biden's deal. And in Joe Biden's deal that happened during his administration, they had a ceasefire deal just before the election and went awry. And the reason why it went awry is Israel accused Hamas of delaying the release process. And now we're seeing them kind of do similar things where they're mad at Hamas in terms of certain things regarding hostages, even though all the alive ones are gone, but they're upset with certain the dead ones, and then them and whether or not they are going to leave. So we'll see how that plays out. And then Hamas accused Israel of violating the terms by killing Palestinians, hindering aid, and refusing to begin negotiations for the second phase of the deal. So this is important. Will we be able to get to the second phase of the deal? So the prior deal under the Biden administration said that during the first stage, Hamas released 33 hostages in exchange for Israel releasing 30 to 50 Palestinians for every Israeli release. During the first stage, Israel allowed sufficient quantities of humanitarian aid, allowed displaced Palestinians to return to their home, and started to make a phased withdrawal from Gaza. During the first stage of the ceasefire, talks were supposed to begin between both parties for a more permanent cessation of hostilities. In the second stage, Israel would accept a permanent ceasefire, and Hamas would then release the remaining living male hostages, both civilians and soldiers, for an exchange of Palestinian prisoners. In the third stage, the remains of deceased Israeli hostages will be released. Under the May 5th proposal, Israel would commit to lifting the blockade on the Gaza Strip, but this commitment obviously did not land. Israel ended it. So, were you about to say something? I heard you speaking up. Do you want
Uh,
to say something?
no, but one point I wanted to add to the previous 2 points is that although you've said that this deal favors Israel, there are members of the Israeli government that did reject the deal. That is important to point. The far right members.
For sure. And I do think that's an important point, because the far right parts of the Israeli government that I've always criticized, I've been consistent with that the entire time, even though I had, for the most part, more neutral opinions regarding the conflict, is you could definitely say they just wanted full control of Gaza. And this won't allow them. Now, some things that I've heard in terms of like what happened in terms of the conflict, and Netanyahu, one of the reasons why he got elected is because they thought that he was going to take full control of Gaza and make it an Israeli state, so to speak, is that
West Bank. It
he
was the West Bank. His campaign was to annex the West completely. That was his campaign to be elected.
Yeah, and as of right now, some people were saying the reason why this deal was able to happen is because of the stuff that happened with Qatar and the bombing at Qatar, and Netanyahu didn't let Trump know, and that made Trump look a little foolish. And now Trump has a newfound friendship with Qatar, especially after they gave him a Qatari airplane as a gift. So the newfound relationship with Qatar and then the bombing Qatar, some people are speculating that this pressured Netanyahu to kind of fall in line with Trump because he kind of overplayed his hand there. Because once you make Trump look stupid, he tends to be very reactionary. So I don't know if that is true, but I will say that there, even though when it comes to the two plans, the plan that Donald Trump did is basically Joe Biden's plan, and that what I just read was like a more shortened, paraphrased version of it. That was probably more in line with like, okay, I guess both sides do what you got to do. The other ones leaned a little bit, more, definitely more Israel compared to the other one, but Donald Trump being a wild card, regardless of how you feel about his leadership, regardless how you feel about him being, the president of the United States, because of his wild card nature, he definitely puts a little bit more, nerves in certain leaders' neck in comparison, because he may do anything that's crazy and might be destructive for everybody involved, which is never something you want. It can have everybody on edge, of course. So that is something that I've heard on the grapevine. I'm 50-50 whether or not that is true, but we will again have to see how that takes place. Do you want to say something?
I don't know if all it took was like a Qatari plane as a gift. I don't think that's all it took to secure this deal. I mean, the bombing of Qatar was stupid, but again, the
Of
Israeli
course, that
government
was a little
always does stuff.
hyperbolic for sure. There's
Yeah,
definitely
yeah, yeah,
more incentives given to Trump that
yeah, yeah.
other than
Of
just
course,
the plane.
he's a businessman. He tries to be pragmatic about like the most to gain, the least to lose in terms of finances.
Yeah,
That's his
they
nature.
put plenty of money in
Um,
that meme coin, but we digress. Go ahead.
so yeah, like I said, the Israelis they bombed Qatar, which I don't really think is on like I thought it was a very Israeli thing to do because if you have the basically power to do anything and not get punished for it, that's that's what you do. Maybe that was too far because Qatar is such an ally to the US in terms of money because of the oil and stuff. It's a very small country. It doesn't have a military. It doesn't really have any power outside of the fact that there is a lot of money there. So yeah, that's probably something that Israel is just like I said. Israel is not a very pragmatic country in terms of realizing what the consequences of their actions could be. They just act on impulse sometimes, and that's usually the biggest problem that most of the world really has with them. It's that they are a very unreasonable country in terms of every government, not just this government. Most of the time, they do things that you question why they do it, even according to their own stated goals. I have my own theories, but I'm not here to push an agenda because it's your show. Um. So yeah, go on. What were you going to say?
Um, yeah, I think that's fair, and I understand the perspective you're coming from. When it comes down to it, with the U.S. backing, Israel does definitely has a lot more edge to them as long as they feel that the United States is covering them. With that said, both deals were put in place. The other deal is very similar to Joe Biden's deal. Personally, I don't have any evidence to back it up. I do think it was kind of strange how Israel basically just ended the ceasefire deal right when the election was about to happen, and then they became more unhinged than I've seen them beforehand, and that played right. They knew. I feel like they knew what they were doing. They knew Donald Trump was going to be an Israel shill and the Republicans. And now with the ceasefire deal done like months later, which could have been done earlier if Donald Trump really wanted to. You had the whole framework already created for you, but there wasn't that pressure. He didn't feel like it. When he felt like it, he would put that pressure on, and then the same ceasefire deal basically that was put on last time, we put on again. Well, just like last time, it ended right after the first phase. Right now, we're having murmurs of Israel not being happy about certain things Hamas is doing and threatening to cut off certain aspects of aid. So the reaction of the United States of America and the Trump administration will be very pivotal to see how this plays out more. And I'm also curious of like the other Arab countries to see how much they get involved. This is going to be a process. Now, will this go in full fruition? Because it's going to require so many different moving parts. One, it's going to require Donald Trump to have all this authority over the area. It's going to require a reformation of Palestinians. And what will that look like? It will require the reformation of the Palestinian Authority. What will that look like? And there's just so much questions. But the big two things, if you're listening to this podcast, that you need to pay attention to is, will Hamas officially leave? One, and what will be the governing body? Like, what would the governing body of this new Gaza look like? Two. Those are like the two big things to pay attention to moving forward in regards to this ceasefire deal. Do you have anything to add to that?
I just hope it's not Tony Blair. Like, Tony Blair is just the only reason I'm speaking as a Middle Eastern here. The only thing he's famous for in the Middle East is the baseless invasion of Iraq. Like, that's what he's famous for, and that's probably why he's a terrible person to put as the main actor in this role. I don't think he should be involved because of that, like the name itself and the connotations of the name. I don't know what his intentions are, but like I said, there are so many people you could have chosen. Like, you don't need to choose the guy who waged the Iraq War. Like, that's not the best person to choose.
Well, they're gonna pick their buddies, of course. That's what he's gonna do. He's gonna pick the people he trusts. We are, as an American, I know that Donald Trump doesn't care about
who weren't involved.
Oh no, he doesn't care about if you're qualified. He cares about if you're loyal and you're on his side. And so that's going to be the big thing. That's why I'm like, what will this governing body look like? What will the leadership do? And will they do what's in the best interest of the Palestinians? Or will it look like that they're there for a neutral upheaval of the area and secretly be doing things in the best interest of certain actors? These are very important questions. So I'm just very curious to see how that plays out, because you never know. Well, I kind of know. I always know with Trump. My predictions on him have been pretty clear. Someone said, how can Israel stop aid right now? All part of the empire. It's a new settler colonial project. Hey man, we'll see how this plays out. I won't go that far, and I don't know how Israel could stop aid, but they threatened to not send half the aid just recently because of something Hamas did. So it's really unhinged. So
I don't even know what they've done. I mean, not returning the dead bodies should not be a reason to. If that's really the reason they are pausing the ceasefire, I don't even know what grounds you could support Israel on at this point. Like, not returning dead bodies, really?
To be honest, after the January ceasefire deal, a lot of the people who were like more neutral saw the nuance of the conflict. The moment Israel broke that ceasefire deal, all those people, including myself, was like, why the fuck did you end the ceasefire deal? That made no sense. Their reasoning was terrible. And it seemed very obvious that they had some ulterior motive. So at this point, I think it really depends. Can they get Donald Trump back on their side to do what they want? What matters more to Donald Trump? his allegiance to Israel or his image of being the peacemaker. You never know. That part you never know. Honestly, you never know. But this is the next another big part of the conversation in regards to this is not only like what will happen with this area and all the different stipulations of the ceasefire plans that are taking place, and if it will come into fruition, or will it be something that right when the time counts for it, it will blow up again in the most unopportune moment. Because I am concerned with certain things that Donald Trump has done for the United States of America. A lot of his plans that are supposed to be helping certain aspects of Americans and with his presidency. So will this deal be the same the moment he is done president? This deal is like, oh yeah, I don't have to do it anymore, or Israel starts becoming unhinged. I don't know. That's too much conjecture, so I'm just gonna leave that in the air. As of right now, the question is, does Donald Trump deserve credit for ending the ceasefire deal? That's very important because I'm seeing a lot of politicians say and giving him flowers. I saw Bill Clinton, I saw Kamala Harris, I saw Joe Biden. All say I also saw Joe Biden and a couple other Biden administration people say, good job using our plan to get a ceasefire deal. That was genius. They're absolutely correct. I love that. I love that. But a lot of them are going to say, it's good. The fighting has stopped. That's good. From your perspective, from being someone that's not in America, because of course people know I don't like Trump and I'm in America, but do you give Trump credit as someone outside looking in for the ceasefire deal?
Okay, so in terms of the Palestinian issue, generally speaking, I don't think we um, have, like, as outsiders, we have like a difference in opinion about the left and the right in the US because both of them have been very pro-Israel. The right has been more open about it because of the Christian nationalist um, like movement, like Ted Cruz and others. But
Mm-hmm.
on the left, yeah, they say nice things, but they never act on them. I mean, he says Joe Biden. He said that they used his plan, but why didn't he enforce it then? He had like 2 years, or like 1 year and a half, or like I don't know, but he had a lot of time,
Well, the
and he didn't
plan,
do
the ceasefire deal that they put in place was made in January, and they ended it right before the election. So
it.
that
Yeah, but
point,
January was
like
how
this
many? Like that was
January.
like 15 months. 15 months after the war started. He had 15 months.
Oh, you're talking about everything beforehand. Okay.
No, I'm
Oh,
talking about like if he's going to ask to be given credit for that ceasefire, then why didn't he enforce it in those 15 months?
I mean, it probably
Like,
wasn't finalized, and the deal beforehand, there was a lot more. It was lot more back and forth. Israel progressively got worse, you could definitely say, but initially, obviously, people felt like Israel was justified in terms of like getting their hostage back in retaliation after October 7th. But at a certain point, one thing that I can agree is that at a certain point, it's like, all right, we got to end it, and they definitely needed to put more pressure. I think I agree to that. I agree.
yeah, in response to the comment, I've already commented, but yeah, I meant the establishment Democrats, not the regular people on the ground, you know.
Fair.
Yeah, like the government, the president specifically. Because Bill Clinton had a like a similar situation like 25 years ago, and the plan that he says Yasser Arafat rejected was actually very pro-Israel to the point that the Israelis themselves said if we were Palestinians we would have rejected it. Like that was it was just a continuation of the status quo, but it called it a state. That's it. Like a demilitarized state under the military control of Israel. That's what Palestinians were offered, apparently. So that was during a left-wing government, Bill Clinton.
Fair. I mean, you could be dissatisfied with it. That's fine. And was that the one? I'm trying to remember the time frame. Is that the one the leader of Israel got assassinated?
Um, the
Or
beginning of it, yes.
yeah,
Like the one who initiated the Oslo Accords, he was assassinated, and he was apparently assassinated by the current government, but that's another issue.
yeah. People
Um,
speculate it was the far right Israelis that assassinated him.
yeah, because
That's
right before the assassination, the current settlements minister, Ben-Gvir, has threatened to kill him, and then he died. So really, but yeah, after he died, another left-wing prime minister was in power, Ehud Barak, and although Palestinians demilitarized in the West Bank, that didn't stop Israel from building more settlements and expanding at an insane rate. And that was most likely why Palestinians were not okay with the deal, because it didn't stop Israel from expanding. So if we're going to demilitarize, then they're going to expand, and then we're going to be under their military control so they can expand even further after we agree to do it. Then it just legitimizes what the UN considers illegal.
that's fine. I am when it comes to the nitty gritty. If you have dissatisfaction with certain ceasefire deals, there's that is perfectly reasonable. At the end of the day, when it comes down to the negotiation, who has leverage, who has power, it's never going to be a truly fair deal. Um, in regards to this one, for sure, how do you feel about it? Because the biggest question is, do you think Donald Trump deserves credit for it? Do you think this is going to be good? At the very least, you can look at it in two lenses, in the short term and the long term.
On the short term, yeah, for sure, he deserves credit because, like I said, any pause in the fire at this point is welcomed, and any person who forces it deserves credit, even if it's temporary. I mean, the last time it was 2 months. Again, 2 months is a good, like, it's a long time because the previous one was like 4 days or something. So a 2 month ceasefire last time, it was, a breather at least. So the insane rate of killing, stopping it is, and he said he has the intention of continuing it this time. So he does deserve credit for putting an end to the fight, regardless of how fair it is, because I knew it was not going to be a fair deal. But regardless of that, a ceasefire is still a good thing in principle. So I'd say he
Mm-hmm.
deserves credit for it, especially because, like I said, he actually enforced it. Biden can say all he wants, or Harris can say all she wants, that they made that deal, but in the end, they didn't enforce it. They had 15 months and they didn't enforce it. So they cannot come now and complain about it. I mean, they
Yeah,
had
I
more
mean,
time than he did.
I disagree with the notion that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris can't say that they can take credit for the deal. I think they for sure can because this deal was built upon the deal that they created, not a deal that Donald Trump created. Um, and in this retrospect, whether or not it gets enforced will be a question mark up until the next couple months, because we already talked about Israel's already threatening to remove aid. Hamas has said that, or Palestinians have said that they've killed like 7 Palestinians already, in the midst of a ceasefire deal. So Israel, whether or not they stay 10 toes, and whether or not Hamas de-arms, will be the question. And Donald Trump already said that if Hamas doesn't step down, he feels like Israel can do what they want. So this could be a situation where, in comparison with when, like, after the Israel stopped the ceasefire deal, the most recent time, the Democrats and Joe Biden's administration was very critical. Like, what are you doing? In this way, Donald Trump says, "Oh, if Hamas doesn't leave, don't worry about it. Keep doing what you're doing." He's basically saying it's up to you, Hamas, or Israel could do whatever they want. That's a different level of enforcement where it's not really pressuring Israel, but he's pressuring Hamas,
Yeah,
which
yeah, I get the point. That's a good point.
depending on how you feel about that, you know.
Yeah, that's a very good point because one side has way more power than the other. If you're pressuring the weaker side, then Yeah, I get your point.
Um, but ultimately, if it does come into fruition and it's a permanent ceasefire at some point, then yeah, Donald Trump deserves credit. Regardless of how much I hate Donald Trump and I think he is a fascist, he deserves credit for establishing peace
Yeah,
in
I
this
hate him
area.
too. Like I'm not saying that I like him.
Oh yeah, I'm not
Like
putting it on you. Don't
obviously.
worry, I'm not putting it on you. Uh, but some of the kind of final points, and again, if anybody if who wants to say your piece, some of the final things that I am curious to look into as time goes on regarding this deal is you mentioned some interesting points. And if this deal does go into fruition, you had issues with other ceasefire deals because of certain things that could lean Israel. And some of the things that I've noticed in the deal that they posed is one, they didn't talk about settlers at all in the 20-point plan. That's something a lot of people have issues with in terms of settlers buying up land and occupying the West Bank. And of course, we have the question of whether or not that will take place in Gaza too. And it's interesting that in this plan, they said that they will create like an economic zone, a special economic zone with preferred tariff and access rates to be negotiated with participating countries. So there's going to be an incentive for people to occupy Gaza, to settlers to occupy Gaza, which also honestly touches upon something that somebody in the audience said about colonial, a little colonialism, and so that's interesting that they didn't touch upon, Israelis buying up the land. Another interesting aspect about it is the ISF. Yes, they said the IDF it kinda can leave, like under certain stipulations they can kinda leave, but that they will have an ISF, so the Palestinians won't have their own military. It'll be a military run by the United States and other Arab countries, and we don't know how much influence Israel will have, and we don't know how much influence the PA will have either. Um, you said who are the speakers? It doesn't feel like they're too familiar with what's going on. If they think there might be settlers in Gaza, or that Biden could have gotten this plan accepted by either Hamas or Israel. Oh, okay, base, cool. Anyway, so when it comes down to it, the situation with the ISF, I'm very curious to see how that plays out and what that will mean in terms of like the military and will they be a truly neutral body in that era, and what will the reformation plans look like for the Palestinians, the de-radicalization of Palestinians? Who will be orchestrating that? Will that be Arab USPA like involved? Will Israel be involved in de-radicalizing Palestinians? Because even though like from what polling that I've seen, a good chunk of them wanted the fighting to just end. A good chunk of them did not want to be there. But there was a percentage uh, that I don't want to give a number. I haven't seen this poll in a while. It was a decent number percentage that still felt mad at Israel. Let me simplify the terminology. So
That is
de-radicalizing those people will be interesting to see. What did you guys say?
no, mad is a crazy term. Uh, it's a
I
crazy
just try to make
euphemism.
it simple for people. Just
I've said earlier in this episode that I'm not going to get too deep into my opinion outside of the deal, but this part I have to because this is a core part of if you want peace in the future or not. I think the term de-radicalization is dehumanizing to Palestinians. No population that went through decades of oppression should be told that they only hate their oppressors because of their ethnicity. That's like saying the slaves hated white people because they were white. That is a crazy, like, euphemism or oversimplification. Palestinians will never love Israel. That will never happen, and they have every right to hate Israel. Let's just get that out of the way. They will never be radicalized because the term itself carries the Israeli narrative of, oh, they only hate us because we're Jewish. They are taught to hate Jewish people, not because, they killed a lot of them, they raped a lot of them, they imprisoned a lot of them. It's been decades upon decades of oppression. You cannot oversimplify it to they hate them because they are Jewish. That's not the reason they hate them. They hate them because of what they did to them. So de radicalization needs to start in Israel, not in Palestine. It needs to start in Israel. They are the side that has the power. They are the side that does things that radicalize the Palestinians. So this has no middle ground. I cannot be neutral about this. Israel has to
Okay.
stop treating Palestinians like slaves. They have to. If they want a de-radicalized Palestinian population, they need to stop treating them like subhumans.
So I think that's a very fair point when it comes down to it. Now, that's the question on like how it will be implemented into practice at the end of the day. Is they will refer to it as de-radicalization. They will look at the people. Of course, there are going to be people who are going to have dismay that will never truly like the Israelis, but ultimately know that they want to live in peaceful lifestyle. Um, and that's going to be the case, which understandably, people who are affected on both sides will never truly respect the other side, or will never truly love the other side. But there has to be a level of understanding, and a lot of the de-radicalization, I'm sure, is going to start from the young, the youth, of course. There also needs to be an end of like, you know what's the term, I think I like dehumanization, but kind of just breaking stereotypes as well from the older generation is going to be very essential for both Israel and the Palestinians. But the people with the power have the more of the opportunity to offer the olive branch compared to the people who were, the side that doesn't have power, as you said. So if that were to happen in terms of their process of de-radicalization, Israel does have to play a huge part in establishing that. That doesn't mean that Palestinians don't also have a part to play. But in order for that to happen, I agree that Israel is going to have to be in the forefront in treating them as fellow human beings. That's going to be very essential. Now, will that happen and how it will work out? Again, I am unsure. So that's something else to kind of pay attention to. So those are like all the big aspects of the ceasefire deal that took place in the plan regarding Trump and Israel and Palestine. A couple days after the ceasefire deal, it's interesting to see there's like cracks in it with all the different things that Hamas has been saying and Israel's been saying and Trump's been saying. But we will hope that the peace is retained regardless, and that we'll see if the Donald Trump administration is able to pressure them. One thing that I have heard that again differentiates Donald Trump from Joe Biden is that Donald Trump can speak the language of the far right in the Israeli government, and that's obviously something Joe Biden could not do. So the people in power, Donald Trump speaks their language, so maybe they can come to more of a agreed upon, understanding in terms of pushing this peace forward. Now, just because an understanding of peace is step pushed forward, doesn't mean that there's going to be things underlying that could be hugely negative, so to speak, to certain parts of this ceasefire deal. So never just kind of let it be. It's like, oh, we're all good. This is only the beginning of peace. This is not the end of peace. This is only the beginning of the peace. So you can't just keep your eyes closed and just hope that Netanyahu and Trump are going to save the day. I mean, good luck with that one. That's just not going to work out as easily. You have anything else that you want to say before we wrap up?
There's a comment that said, "Do you hope for peace?" Believe actually, even the two-state solution is probably not the best idea for peace. Always this feeling that the only way you can actually have peace there is a one-state solution, where everyone is equal and like it's a demilitarized state. But that's not gonna happen. And as long as either one side or both have weapons, that hatred will continue to be there, especially when the powers of the world are on one side. So I mean, having hope for peace, okay, I'm always a hopeful person. I hope for peace, but at the same time, I don't think this ceasefire deal specifically sets a good ground for peace. I think it just sets a good ground for at least a pause It's been a rough 2 years to live. I've known a lot of Palestinians. Some of them have died. So it it's good to see at least a pause, and I hope it's longer than 2 months this time. So that's part of it. In terms of long-term peace, I feel like long-term peace is the only way you can have it is that what I just said, like a one-state solution. Uh, it's the only way, because even a two-state solution could, depending on the terms, could just be a continuation of the status quo, and that is not peace. There's no peace in the West Bank. It's demilitarized, it's de-radicalized, and still there's no peace there. So unless your definition of peace is Israel going in and killing like 1,000 every year instead of 50,000, if that's your definition of peace, then so be it. But I think every life is equal. I think the numbers don't make it bad. The notion itself is bad. Like I think the Holocaust would have been as bad even if 10% of the number was killed. So that's just my view of it, like I said. So yeah, we just need to. The first step, like I said, in the de-radicalization and the peace needs to start with justice. And the only way for justice to take place is for Israel to be less fascist in terms of just the ground it's built on, which is very difficult. I know, but maybe it could happen someday. know, I feel like every generation is generally around the world, not just Israel, but every generation of the world is less fascist than the previous one. I believe so.
Uh, I don't know if I completely agree with that, but do I have hope for peace? I don't have hope for peace in this current administration, both in Netanyahu's administration and Donald Trump's administration. But I do think there has been enough very vocal pressure put from Israel's actions that the only ally they have is the United States. But I do think that if a Democrat is elected again, the Democrats will not be nearly as nice to Israel next time around because of everything that's happened in terms of the recent election. So, in addition to that, and all the other countries around them basically being not too happy with Israel, all the international bodies not being happy with Israel, and then now the people that they weren't the friendliest with like, and they're trying to establish a certain level of camaraderie with like Qatar, Iran, Egypt. Those people are trying to form certain relationships with the United States as well. So I think eventually in a couple of years we'll see how this plays out. Under a different regime for the United States, I think a different regime would also pressure Netanyahu, and I think the Israeli people, there are a lot of them there, also don't like Netanyahu, and I mean he also had
Are you
that
sure
whole
about that? I mean, there's a reason he's the most elected. There's the reason he's the most elected prime minister of Israel. So saying he's unpopular is kinda, yeah, I don't know. I think he is popular.
No, I've seen a lot, especially like you said, like the younger generation of Israelis. A lot of them do not like him. All the old people of Israel like him, for sure. But we're talking about the next generation. I'm talking about years from now. So if I'm referring to those people who saw everything that has happened, saw this deal, saw the death, saw the things that happened in terms of how long it took for people to come back to the country, saw the corruption from Netanyahu and how the courts were like, hey, you're doing this corrupt thing, and then Donald Trump says that yes, can't be prosecuted in Netanyahu, that's not allowed. And under the ceasefire deal, they might be able to kind of go through that. There is an intrigue with all this pressure that Netanyahu can be pressured to step down from internally and externally. So if Netanyahu is gone, and a lot of the far right Israeli and this is all hopeful thinking, of course. I do think we're gonna have a Democratic president for sure after Donald Trump. But in addition to that, and if enough pressure is put on the Israeli government and they change the regime, I do think peace can be established because I do think the precedent has officially been set that nobody wants this conflict to continue anywhere around the world. You, at this point, have no allies other than Republicans right now. So
That is the part I'm hopeful about, not necessarily the Trump administrated ceasefire deal, but the fact that in the last 2 years we've seen so many countries recognizing Palestine as a state and also uh, not being as protective of Israel as before. Like they've seen what Palestinians have been dealing with for decades, so now they're like, at least in terms of publicly condemning Israel, because when you have to condemn someone, even if you're supporting them under the table, because I'm sure the UK is, for example, that means you know your population isn't with you. Because when it comes to democracies, you have to make your people happy in terms of certain things. So the next democratic president may be, if it's a Democrat, I don't know. I'm not sure because you're so hopeful about this. I'm not sure if they get another Zionist in office, then I don't know if it will be. Yeah, I don't know if he'll win. That's what I'm trying to say. Because if you're going to lose all of that voter base, because that's how they lost this time. I mean, according to many experts, I'm not an expert, but a lot of people said that part of the reason the Democrats lost this election is because they were too pro-Israel, and usually the pro-Israel side is the Republicans. So if you're going to lose
Yeah,
that voter base, then you're not going to win, because it's a large voter base of people who don't want to have their hands in this.
yeah. I mean, I think it'll be a bit different by the time the next election comes up. We'll see if the conflict resumes, but I don't think it's going to be nearly as large but an issue um, for the next presidential election. And the bigger part, instead of like focusing on the people that are super pro Palestine on the far left, is that they have to start appealing to the people in the middle, the independents, and those people care more about like healthcare, and they care about prices going down economically. And it's more going to be a retaliation vote for Trump, though, because everything he's been doing. I mean, I feel like I don't have to explain all the crazy things he's been doing when it comes to using the military, doing unconstitutional stuff, attacking freedom of speech, X, Y, and Z. Tariffs are ruining the economy, all that bad stuff.
That's crazy.
So even if people don't vote for the electee, whether that's Gavin Newsom, more than likely it's going to be Gavin Newsom, because they like Gavin Newsom, they will vote for Gavin Newsom because they hate Trump and they hate MAGA because they're going to run a MAGA candidate, and they're not going to have, unless Donald Trump tries to run for a third term, which at this point can't say wheel it out. Unless that happens,
That's actually
they
possible.
don't. I'll say that again.
Is that actually possible?
It's not. But if they try to make some weird argument that because the election was stolen, he deserves to get another opportunity, I don't know at this point. So
Yes.
they come up with the wildest of things. But they don't have another MAGA person that has enough charisma anyway. So I just think it's a pretty foregone conclusion. But at this point, you never know what could happen in the next 3 years. That I don't know. Who knows? We'll see. But that's pretty much all I got. Someone did ask where you are from in the Middle East.
I'm from Egypt. The deal was signed here. In terms of how my society views Israel, of course they hate it. I mean, the governments are mostly pro-United States in the global, US versus Russia Cold War continuation thing. But the people on the ground don't care about the US versus Russia. So, in terms of Israel, they are like, the population of Egypt is like 99% pro-Palestine, and very heavily so. Not in the Western way of two-state solution, or like the way that the West, some of it supports Palestine. Not in that friendly manner, I mean. So most of the Middle East, really, not just Egypt, most of it hates Israel with passion, because we've had many wars with Like Egypt had like 3 wars with them. So yeah, that does leave a stain. And also, what they do in Palestine is the main reason. It's not these 3 wars in particular, because really the situation between Egypt and Israel is politically it's peaceful, but the main reason as a society we don't like them is because of what the Palestinians have suffered. That's it.
You know, respect the empathy. All right. With that said, appreciate everybody who's listened to the podcast. That is all we got for today. Went over the entire ceasefire deal, how it compared to Biden's administration. Gave Donald Trump credit. I know you don't hear that very often on my podcast, in terms of what it is, but we also gave highlights of things to look out for in terms of the ceasefire deal. Things to look out for in terms of whether or not this will go to phase 2 and phase 3. We shall see. Appreciate you coming on, Emir, to give your opinion and your insight on the conflict, of course. Always, no problem. These open panels are always here to kind of hear everybody's thoughts and hear everybody's point of views. It's not really a debate for these open panels. We'll be back next Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. EST. Talk about another thing down with more than likely something focused on U.S. politics. With that said, hope you guys enjoyed. You have a good one. Take care and peace.